Do, 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 do. It is now broadcasting. Hello, everyone.
It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of #EventIcons. Presented by Endless Events. The show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything. Use the question panel on the webinar to submit your questions. Or you can hop on Twitter. Submit your questions with #EventIcons. We'll be answering your questions live during the entire show. Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better conversation we can have. So please help share #EventIcons on Twitter and Facebook. Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com. Now, without any further delay, this is #EventIcons.
Well, hello, and welcome today to How to Create Family-Friendly Events. I am Tahira Endine, one of your hosts. Couple down from me, we've got Brant Kruger, our event provocateur and second host. Today we are joined by Chad Collins from Open World Inc. So Chad is an inventor with two U.S. patents to your name. You've been featured on every major news outlet. That's a lot. And you have Guinness records. So we're going to hear more about those in just a minute. So after we hear about how you got started. And then Shelley Matheny, KidsAlong events. Shelley started her career with Merit's Global Events. And I said I wouldn't say this, but I'm going to say it. The first time that I worked on an event with Shelley was about 100 years ago when I showed up and she was managing all of these awesome kids in Washington, D.C., when we worked on something called the National Alopecia Areata Foundation, which was still for me one of the most magical events that I've ever worked on. So she's got a ton of experience, starting with Merits and then going into her own business, KidsAlong events. So specializing in all the corporate side of events, but for children. So obviously not children CEOs, but the children who come with their parents on these events. So we're going to just get started and ask you guys a little bit about yourselves. So you've both been, doing different kinds of events. So Shelley, you've been supporting events, as I just said, for a long time. So where one of you is a little bit newer to the whole event thing. So Shelley, let's start with ladies first. What got you into this events industry?
So I actually started working at Merits Travel, like you said, 1,000,000 years ago, doing events, corporate events, incentives, traveling all over. And then I actually started working with a company called Shelley, which is a direct selling company. And they included children at their meetings, but they never wanted to talk about it. So I really was, I think, instrumental in bringing the idea of having kids at your meetings, an important component to it. Having had my second child, commuting to the city and traveling a lot, I decided I would like to start my own thing and noticed a huge trend. And so I launched KidsAlong. My first event was actually in Hawaii for a company. I guess I'm not really supposed to mention companies, but it was a huge event with 150 kids and it was crazy. But I thought if it's successful, this is how I'm going to start my business. And so I did.
Excellent. And Chad, tell us about what you've been doing. And if you could tell us what the Guinness record is for as well, that would be awesome.
Absolutely. Well, the way we got started was actually at the request of my then 7-year-old daughter. After I brought home some Lego from the Lego store and started sharing it with her, she immediately, what all kids do that age, goes on YouTube and starts watching YouTube videos about other people experiencing Lego, which quickly escalated into her asking if we could create YouTube videos together, and that kind of put us on this path. After about 1.5 years of creating YouTube videos, we put up 500 different videos. We accumulated over 12 million video views and got to know that there were these Lego conventions that were happening all over the country. So our intention was to simply go to one of these conventions and cover it and show our audience that they could be with people just as enthusiastic about this thing. It just happened to be Lego at this time, could experience together. And being from the Philadelphia area, the thought was, well, there's got to be an event in our market, right? It's the fifth biggest market in the United States. Clearly, there has to be a Lego event here. And what we found were just local events at libraries or after school activities, but there was nothing on a large scale. So in 2014, we hosted our first ever Brickfest live event. And we attracted tens of thousands of attendees to this. And then that's what kind of catapulted us into the event production company that we are now. To answer your question about the Guinness World Record, we hold a few, but the most notable one for this show, in 2016, we held an event for Minecraft, which is a very popular video game, very popular with kids, of course. And we had over 12,000 attendees, which broke the world record for the largest ticketed video game event for a single video game.
Wow.
So, yeah, and we intend to break that again.
Awesome. Well, we like to break records. So
let's keep going.
So today we said we're going to talk about family-friendly events. So again, we'll start with you, Chad, because you were just talking there. So what does family-friendly mean to you?
For us, it means, in our space, in like the science and tech space, in the maker space, in the Comic-Con space, there are a lot of events for adults specifically, right? That they will go to, and they will often bring their kids along, but they might be kicking and screaming and diminishing the experience for that adult. And for us, a family-friendly event means that the parent is purchasing the ticket for the child. And they resign themselves to the fact that once they walk into the room, they're going to let their child, walk them around and show them what they're enthusiastic about. So it's focused around them. And at the same time, at our shows, we provide content for the adult, for the parent, to learn a little more. And we have some activities where they can actually engage together as a family unit. So, kids first. That's how we think about it. That's how our production team thinks about it.
And then you did say KidsAlong, which leads us right into Shelley. So what does family-friendly mean to KidsAlong?
Well, it's hard to, say exactly what he said, but really, Chad, it's the same sort of thing, that bringing children to the forefront instead of diminishing their attendance or pretending they're not there, to actually bring them in as part of the experience, that bringing your kids along, teaching your children about what you're doing, allowing them to also feel, the reward for all the hard work, for all, usually a lot of, in this case, for incentives, to bring your kids along and have them have a travel experience or enjoy the destination and make it a special event just for kids. So like little mini conferences for children.
But it sounds like in both cases, we're talking about not making it a bolt-on product where, you're just adding this extra service to take care of the kids for the adult situation going on, but actually making that a primary focus of what you guys are both providing to the events. I love the Lego and the Minecraft aspect, the kind of the STEM aspect of what you've got going on, Chad. Tell us more a little bit, if you can, about the types of events that you're working on. How long are they usually? Are they one-day events? Are they half-day events? How exactly does that work with your typical events?
Sure. I mean, I'll talk to you about our Mind Fair, our Minecraft event, since we're in like full steam ahead with that tour right now. We've already had 2. We have another 10 or so for the rest of the year. That event it involves, it's 2 days. So you can either, attend for one day, 10 to 5, or oftentimes if people are coming in from out of town, we'll buy tickets to attend both days. And it really immerses them in the game in ways that they cannot experience at home, right? It brings them, in some cases, face-to-face with some of the YouTubers that they watch that play the game online. So it gives them a chance to meet these individuals in person, get selfies and get autographs. We have 3 stages at our show where there's different live content happening all day long, including costume contests, panelists with some of the talent that we bring in. And we also provide gaming in ways where they can't necessarily game at home, which is you're gaming next to 100 or 50 other people at the same time. From an educational standpoint, with Microsoft, we highlight Microsoft Minecraft Education Edition. And we bring in global mentors from all over the world so they could talk to parents and the kids about how Minecraft is now being used as a teaching aid in schools where you're learning math and you're learning chemistry. And it's really eye-opening, and it shows the parent that while, yes, their kid may be spending a lot of time in the game, on the computer, in Minecraft, on their device at home, what they're doing is actually a lot of learning, which is going to help them, later on in life. A lot of the problem solving and learning they're doing now is going to have, an unlimited return in the future.
Absolutely. It's, I think I can see how that happens. And you're doing, so is it a multiple day event you're doing, or is it more like one day?
Yeah, you can absolutely experience the entire event in one day. Our programming is identical Saturday and Sunday.
Okay.
Though oftentimes, for certain, some of the talent that comes in, there's long lines, and you may or may not want to wait in that line or spend time waiting in that line. So oftentimes people do buy the 2-day pass so they don't feel like they have to cram everything into one day. And it kind of, takes the pressure off, and they can have it a more enjoyable weekend and make it a destination.
I think it's worth just pausing for just a second for anybody who maybe doesn't have kids or maybe just hasn't gotten into the Minecraft world, just elaborating a little bit on that, because I was kind of ones on the side that just kind of poo-pooed it, and why are kids burying their heads in this thing? And, I was definitely in those ranks until I played it myself, and I could kind of see for anybody who doesn't know the game, it's kind of like virtual Legos, but there is an actual game behind it where you have to survive on in a hostile environment, and the longer you can do all that stuff. But underneath all that is this infinite Lego box that is really quite mind-opening, and I wound up having an enormous amount of fun with my kids, like getting on, being in the same world, building things together, and some of the amazing stuff that they just came up with, like you can with a set of Legos, really blew my mind. And so I think for anybody who might be just going Minecraft, about that kind of thing, it's worth looking into, and knowing a little bit more about it.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I mean, you kind of hit the nail on the head, and that's why like our Lego event Brickfest Live and our Minecraft event Mindfair really attract a very similar audience. And in fact, a lot of the parents that are bringing their kids to these events, they get what you just said. They get the fact that in Minecraft specifically, there's an unlimited sandbox. Look, you can create in many different ways. In creative mode, you see people that are literally building cities in Minecraft, and there have been new plans of new cities where kids have been able to build and adults have been able to build and present them at council meetings where they get approval to actually do the thing that someone built in Minecraft. Like, that's happening. And as we all know, architects, what did they start doing? Some of my best friends now are architects, and it's the same people I used to play in my living room with and build Legos with until we fell asleep at night. So, I mean, all of that is like at play, if you would.
We love play.
Yeah.
We love play. So when you're talking about gaming, it just reminded me, I have a favorite author. Her name is Jane McGonigal, and she's got a website called Event Game, but her whole premise is around reality is broken, why games can fix it. And I think a lot of those things that we think of as parents, I have older teenagers now, but particularly around video games, have been very we feel like, oh, they shouldn't be doing that so much. But when you start to see actually these new real world applications, it is a whole new world. So we just do kind of need to deal with it. But when they're not doing those kinds of things, Shelley, we know that you work with a lot of different conferences, and we're not going to, we won't name names, but, I know there's a lot of Fortune 100 companies in there for their family-friendly programming. So, are you seeing some of these digital things incorporated? What kinds of events, are they typically looking to have you bring in?
I see all kinds of things. We do events for one-day events, like something that's coming up actually on April 25th is Bring Your Kids to Work Day event, where we've done small events small arts and crafts, or we might do something ginormous when there's 2,000 kids, not 10,000 kids, Chad, but like 2,000 kids, where they're shadowing their parents to different areas in which they work, and then following their workshops, they might do a lunch and then a big field of games where they're doing jumpy houses and slides and kite flying and things like that. I love the idea, though, of the video part of it, because especially for our teenagers that really don't really want to be in a kids program, and ways to engage them is a perfect opportunity to include those kinds of things. I do think exactly what you were saying, that it shouldn't be perceived as a negative, because our kids these days are tied to their phones and such. And I like the idea that we could incorporate it into a positive way. So our events are a little bit different, but it's not one or the other. I think that we're always looking at different ways to engage the child, the family, the experience. And I think it's a great way to think about doing.
I can see a Minecraft with Chad coming to a Shelley event soon.
I see it in our future, Chad.
Get those partnerships going. Got to get those partnerships going.
I already see it. I immediately thought, I think we can work together.
So, I mean, it seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, Shelley, but it seems like you're definitely emphasizing more active programming as opposed to just watching the kids. I mean, I know we kind of been dancing around this a little bit, but I just want to make sure that that's being clear as well.
For sure. I would say typically what we've done, the way that I started, is really in the incentive market, where somebody's won a trip, and I'm going to use Hawaii because we do a lot of Hawaii programs, and they're allowed to bring their children. So whenever there's an adult function, there's a child function, and we try to incorporate wherever we are in the world. If it's France, if it's a downtown San Francisco, or if it's Hawaii, that we incorporate those activities that are really in alignment with the culture that's there. So for Hawaii, for example, we might do hula dancing and lei making, but we really do try to make it, we're never just sitting in a room with videos, ever. I don't mean it that way in a negative way, Chad. I mean, we're not watching movies. That's what I should say. We're not just sitting them down watching, having movie time. We really keep them entertained, active, doing lots of different things. So
I've seen those programs. They seem to be having a really good time. I'm just going to say.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, when we think about sort of the people that hire you, I've worked with you on more than one program over the years, but I've never hired you. We've done complimentary things where all of a sudden it's like, oh, Shelley's working on that program. And I think that's, one of the things that happens, of course, is that, especially when we start to get into these large corporations hosting programs, how do they integrate children, and then bringing in the experts. So, when they're working with, whether it's, a third-party planning agency or whether it's a destination management company, there's no spectrum of that agency that really has a specialty on kids. So sometimes they'll get kind of dropped on you because, I'm the mom who happens to work at the company. So, come up with some kids programming, versus actually looking at what, you and Chad are doing, where it is very thoughtful, specific, some of those things that go along with it. So when we start to look at, what are some of those cautions and some of those realities for companies who are bringing in, groups, like bringing in any, service provider to work with their family, what are some of those things that they need to really be thinking about?
Are you asking me, or are you asking Chad?
We're going to ask both of you, but let's start with you.
So I think it's really, what you said is so true, that oftentimes, they don't necessarily want to think about children, because not that they don't like them, but it's a little bit scary liability wise. It's a little bit out of their comfort zone, because an event planner is really focusing on food and beverage and gifts and their experiences. And to add children into the equation seems, because it's often an unknown territory, I think the importance of why you want to align yourself with experts that know how to deal with children and how it can enhance your program, not be a negative, which is, I think, probably what we all experience, that, oh no, we don't want to talk about the kids. Nope. Yep. People are bringing their kids, or we discourage them bringing their kids, or nope, it's just an extra expense. We don't want to talk about the kids. And I think our, mission.
Uh-oh.
Shelley's frozen.
Shelley, come back, Shelley.
Stand it. Let's see. I can't say that without the song.
So while Shelley freezes, then
Yeah.
chat.
Yeah.
So you now said you're doing an event for 20,000 people. I'm assuming that's like 10,000 kids at least. Like,
Right. So here's the thing. I mean, there are two schools of two types of events, right? There's an event that that's open for everyone, and there may be a coalition of kids that are there, and then you want to make sure you have programming for them as they can also then. Or there are events like ours that really the kid is the child is who we're inviting, and we just happen to be able to make the child aware by educating their parent, right? So we're going to mom and dad and saying, hey, there's a Lego event coming. You have a kid that loves Lego. Here's why you should make this a family day. So from our standpoint, when we're inviting a family in, we kind of have a built-in support group for the child that's already there. So everyone is kind of aware that I'm going to a kid's event. It's like you're going to the circus, or you're going to see the next Disney movie that comes out. That's the type of atmosphere that we have. Of course, it's more lively than sitting in a movie theater, but you expect the kids to be there, right? It's not something that's, it's not something that you're like, oh, I didn't realize that. It's not a surprise. Yeah, you know exactly what you're getting into at a Brickfest Live event or a Mindfair event. Yeah.
Well, and it engages different parts of the mind too. It's not just, like she said, not just sitting around watching a movie or.
Oh, of course not.
It's engaging totally different. Did you want to add anything to the cautions? I mean, the things that people have to watch out for when they're, when they are planning on incorporating something like your events?
Yeah. I mean, look, you always want to, at least for our shows, have well-marked places for meetup points, right? Because you'll often have a family unit get separated, and then they need to know how they can come back together, right? So at a family event, at a kids event, we're going to have lost parents, and they're gonna want to know how to reconnect, and you need to make that very clear for them. And some of the ways you do that is obviously to have signage at the show, but also in the handouts that everyone receives when they walk in, have it very clearly marked on there, where they can go to certain meetup points or just landmarks that are at the event where they can have the conversation as they're waiting in line. Oh, they can kind of plan their day, and then they might have the conversation. Well, let's meet up here. If we, after you go your way and I go my way, let's meet up here at 2 p.m. Something like that.
Something we need to be better at and in grown-up events, I feel like.
And the other thing is, like, now, like, it's less and less, right? Because every, even like 8-year-olds have devices now. So, or a watch that if you send a text message, they're going to get a little indication on. So now it's like, there's a lot of texting that happens, at a show for meetups. But other things to consider, are at any event, our bag checks, making sure you have the right security ratio, making sure you have enough people that have been through the emergency response. Every kind of venue has their own different parameters for that. And you just want to make sure your staffing levels are appropriate and you're within fire marshal guidelines, things like that.
Well, I think, and I know that I can speak having seen the work that Shelley has done before, they go through a huge process of, I remember when I first met her being like, where do all these people come from and how do you train them? And, what about all of that? And she has in her family both like someone who did insurance for a long time and a police officer. So, as she started building that company, and I think this is really important when we start to look at, any kind of nanny, child minding, I'm bringing kids to my event, do they have first aid? Do they have training? Have you done background checks? All of those things. And again, I know from an agency side or even an internal corporate, when somebody says, oh, the kids are coming, deal with it, just deal with it it doesn't really work like that. Anybody who's been a parent or an aunt or an uncle or a babysitter knows that, you have to pack extra snacks and you have to, think about other things that, sort of go along with what that day is, before you even start introducing the activities. So now I know that, so I plan a large technology summit, and we have a youth program with 2,300 kids coming who are teenagers. And so we have a lot of different things that happen for them during the day. And of course it's for, it's STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and math, but also STEAM, so adding art and design into that piece. is, some of the parameters that we're looking at. So, are you seeing that there's kind of a best age for learning about these kinds of things? Like where you sort of seeing the most response?
The earlier, the better. I mean, for our events, the Lego events use a little bit younger. So, 5 to 11, 12. And then, of course, you have the enthusiasts that go up into adults like me, huge Lego fan. And then on the Minecraft side, since it's a little bit more technical, you're at like 8 to, 13, 14, 15. And then, of course, Minecraft, a lot of people don't know, started as a game for adults. And then the kids just kind of took it over. So you do have a lot of adult enthusiasts too. But for any type of project-based learning, which is really what STEM and STEAM are all about, the earlier they get started with that, the better. The sooner they can start taking things apart and putting them back together and doing that problem solving in their head, the better off that they're going to be, and the more enthusiastic they're going to be. And as you know, like when you have a STEAM event, we host an event called Young Innovators Fair, where we have all these kind of, different areas of our show, these innovation worlds, where kids can go and learn about robots, or kids can go and learn about coding. And it's really a cue to the parent at that juncture to say, wow, my child is really interested in this specific area in STEM education. And then they know as a parent what to do after the event, right? It's our job to just bring everyone together. And then once they're there, they're going to be able to pick the 2 or 3 things that they're really interested in. And then it's really up to the parent and the child to have that conversation after the event at dinner. What did you like best? For them to keep delivering the goods, which is going to then, we hear stories all the time. After they left the event, they found a company that had this technology they never heard of before. They do all this research about this company. They buy their product, and now they're boom. Now they're it. And that's why we do this. We do this to see those connections get made, to see this and see the smiles.
Parent engagement is always going to make that next level happen. That's always the thing that's going to make it go all the way. I want to come back to something that Tahira brought up, and that's staffing. I'd be curious to know how you guys, how do you find your staffing? How do you vet your staffing? And you brought up the child to staff ratio. What are good ratios for that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, we have, a core team that travels to produce each of our events. So it starts with us. And then, of course, we work in large scale venues. So oftentimes the venue will have staff to allocate to the show, whether it's security staff or ticket takers, explainers in some cases. Explainers, yeah. Or like brand ambassadors, I guess is another term that you would use for an activation. And then, of course, we have a lot of companies that come in and they have their own staff to help them run their own activations. An event our size, they're usually like from soup to nuts. You're looking between 100 and 250 people. Between that's from our staff to transportation to volunteers. You name it, it runs the gamut. And a lot of people think, well, there has to be that perfect ratio. But when you have an event like ours that is a family event, you're not necessarily saying, well, how many, I think to answer your question, you're not saying, well, there's going to be X number of kids, so I need X number of adults, right, to manage these kids. It's not like we're going on a class trip and there's a chaperone ratio that a school needs to check a box on. Right, we're inviting a family in, so you have that built-in chaperone that's with the family at all times. So it's our job to just facilitate the event and make sure, the flow is happening. It's exciting. We have stage and lights, camera, action, and it's really the family's responsibility to make sure that they're getting to see and do everything that they wanted to accomplish for the day.
Yeah, it's a very different beast than the type of things that Shelley's doing, where hers is, in addition to an event that's already happening, and yours is a standalone.
Yeah.
Do you ever do kind of a bolt-on where you guys are brought in as part of another group?
Great question. We participated this year at an event called PAX, which is one of the largest gaming conventions in the world. They have a few of them in the US. They had PAX South in January. They asked us to participate to have a Mind Fair activation at the show, but it wasn't a situation like maybe in Shelley's case where it's like, oh, well, this is where you drop your kids, where during the event, this was if you came to the event and you happen to have kids and now they saw that there's this Minecraft activation, well, let's go together and experience it together. And we had a Lego thing there, we had gaming, we had a stage, we had meet and greets. So there was a lot you could do just kind of like in the area they designated to us, but it's not like that's not our core focus. Our core focus is really, we come in, we take up between 80 and 150,000 square feet space. And we're a self-sustained, machine, if you would. Kind of like
space.
Yeah, like if you think of like the Harlem Globetrotters, like all they need is a venue that has a basketball court, and right. So all we need is like give us 100,000 square feet, and like we're good. We can rock and roll. Yeah.
We did have a question come in from the audience, and they're just looking for you to maybe expand a little bit more on any specific logistics that come up when you're dealing with an event for children, for kids. What would be different compared to planning an event that's mainly for adults? Anything else that you haven't already touched on that might be a little bit different?
No, it's a good question. Well, from a logistics standpoint. Like your check-in procedures and all that, like what we do is we make sure the aisles are a little bit wider because we want to make sure the family units stay together. So like that's one thing we think about. But mainly like for adults, when adults go to an event there's like stages and there's going to be someone speaking at a stage or there's going to be a panel. Adults will sit in an audience and they will receive the information in a way very different than how a child is going to receive information or if they're even going to pay attention for that long. So it's important for us to just have fun things happening on the stage that is engaging for the child, but is also entertaining for the adult, right? Which is why we do things like costume contests or lip sync battles, right? Or like minute to win it type activities up on our biggest stage. And we bring in some of the other talent to participate with audience members at the same time. So having that engagement and high energy with a room full, of kids is way more important than producing an event for a room full of, professionals or a room full of adults.
As always, it's about the experience, right? So it's, we keep coming back to that on this show and all over in our industry these days, is that full-on experience. I'm curious to know, and this is something we've talked about in the past, to hear you and I is talking about kind of the psychology and hitting those notes of, you can't just go boom, 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 high. Are you able in your events to do anything that kind of is bringing that energy up and down, and so that you're not just having to hit bigger?
So the way our shows are laid out, and I could talk about Brickfest Live now, since I think we touched on Mind Fair quite a bit. Brickfest Live provides a way for children to interact with like Lego and building experiences in ways they haven't been able to before. And the way that show is laid out, there are different like building stations that enable these types of different building challenges spread out all over the show floor. One of the things that we've done when you talk about bigger, is we created like this mosaic that every participant can have build a little part of. So everyone at the event gets to build their little piece, and then we lay it down, and at the end of the show, you see that it made this giant photo, right? All made out of Lego on the floor. As long as we're during the show, and like that event, a typical family will spend 3 to 5 hours there. And as long as there are enough stations for them to hit in a 3 to 5 hour standpoint, some of them are high energy. Like we have a Lego derby where there's like, someone's doing play-by-play on your race car racing down a ramp and music blaring, right? That's a high energy focal point of the show, as opposed to an architecture zone where there's a giant white Lego architecture building and you're able to focus and build your creation that you're going to add to that, so you can see this city kind of build out over time. So it's almost like those books where you can, choose your own destination. That's kind of the way that event is designed, and it's designed that way on purpose. So if you want to go do the high energy stuff, you can. And if you want to go focus in an area, you can. We even have implemented like reading rest stops where there are books, about Lego. So just have a beanbag chair and, sit down and read a book, and there's families that are just chilling out there for a little while. So yeah, so I feel like we haven't had that yet, Brant, as having to continually outdo ourselves during the event, right? From event to event, do we want to improve? Absolutely. But once the show is on and our programming set, we don't try to continually like beat the next thing. We kind of just has a nice flow the whole time. And she's back.
So sorry.
Yay!
That's all right. Welcome back, Shelley.
Shelley's back, everybody.
So sorry.
That's okay.
What's great is that we just got a really good question that I think is going to be good for you too, which is, what's the most interesting thing that you've seen? So Chad, you talked about some amazing things, but what's the most interesting activation you've seen that has wowed both kids and those, professional parents alike? So what are the things that, either wowed or just that they really love and want to do again?
Well, let's see how to jump right back onto your feet when you've been offline.
Yeah.
I would say I have a couple of different things, but some of my favorite events would be in Vienna. We dressed up all the children in these adorable little lederhosen and sang Edelweiss to the audience when the parents were attending their final night. Getting them to memorize that song was quite a feat, but it was really wonderful. We're actually teaching them to do the hula in front of their parents too when performing. Those kind of things are memories really to last a lifetime, and things that are really unforgettable for the children and the parents. We've traveled all over the world, so locally in San Francisco or Hawaii or Europe, teaching the children French, different languages. So, but really the one of my favorite things is the little lederhosen outfit. a whole, 40 little toddlers to age 7 was just adorable.
Well, and as parents, you can use that forever. The wedding.
Right, you're setting them up.
Right? Yeah, you're making them look good. We're making them look like those memories that last forever. But it is adorable. And that is the kind of thing, you're right, as a parent. You're just like, oh, they're so amazing. Because that's what we do as parents, right? So, as I said, I have teenagers. I do that a lot less now. So, we did talk a little bit about, I think one of the really good questions also that we had was, how do we make an event unforgettable when the meeting conditions are not ideal? So Chad, you just said, yeah, give me 80 to 150,000 square feet. I'm thinking, good God, I'm having a hard time right now finding 10,000 square feet on my event for somebody. So, so what are some of the, those challenges that you've had that you've been like, oh, what can I do to jump over this hurdle? And it's turned out really well. Tell us a story.
Me or Chad? Oops. I can't hear you. I'm having trouble.
Go ahead, Shelley.
Yeah, Shelley, you're going to have lots of stories, so we'll let you start.
I'm going to cry after this session. I would say one of our biggest challenges is always finding meeting space. So let's just say they say we're going to have 50 children and it ends up being 200 children and no meeting space because they don't necessarily want to, admit that the children are coming. So one of our greatest challenges was an event where literally there were supposed to be 30 babies and there were 92 babies. And we were either not going to have enough meeting space for the older kids or we weren't going to have enough space for all the babies. So
just to be clear, literal babies, like not
literally babies, like babies from age 2 months up to 2 years. So not only do you have the babies, but you have the staff to consider. So it's a 1-to-2 ratio for infants to toddlers. So if you've got 90 babies, you have about 50 staff or so. So literally trying to find the right meeting space and, in fact, looking for solutions, not obstacles. So taking over the meeting space that we had reserved for the older kids and finding a space, an outdoor space or an indoor space in their public areas that we can take over for the older kids was really one. Or another one where there's literally no meeting space, so creating like an outside tented area. Or when it rains in Puerto Rico and it's an absolute flood and the little ants come out and the tent is falling down because the rain is so heavy and it hasn't rained in months, maybe even a year, and then suddenly it was a complete downpour. Looking for solutions that keep our children safe and have a good experience and not make them feel like they're an afterthought. So those are some of our challenges. Even being in a castle in Ireland, like putting where are we going to put the kids but there's no space, and creating spaces. We can make any space look amazing and so child friendly.
Dungeons are not acceptable.
Oh, we've been like in dungeons, like, okay, this is our space and you have to quickly turn it around and make it look happy, comfortable, and it must be safe.
Yeah. So one of the conferences that I planned for many years was the Early Childhood Educators Conference. And, and that wasn't even bringing kids. That was bringing the people who educate kids. But there was always like, you'd get the radio call of, okay, so Barbara's in room 212 and is trying to rig a tent from the ceiling. Like, what? Or, the music session is right next door and they're being too noisy. It's like, well, you could have mentioned you're bringing 30 drums.
Oh my gosh. I know
the session description. So.
One of the things that really stood out, I remember, was doing an event in Vancouver, actually, at the aquarium. And we decided we were going to do an overnight and let's just say, and teach the children about how they fed the creatures. Like, how do you feed the fish? How do you feed the whales? And doing an overnight with the staff and traipsing in the sleeping bags and the food. It was pretty funny. And then it was, it was the beluga whales, and the logistics of that are quite an undertaking, but unforgettable.
200 kids. Here, everybody take a herring.
I'm serious.
All of a sudden, Chad, Lego looks really safe.
Sure. It's a good story, for sure.
It is.
We don't do overnights anymore.
Chad, have you ever had an overnight Lego camp?
No. Oh my goodness. I couldn't imagine that.
I feel like you should do a whole dry grad thing, actually. I feel like there's a whole new market for you there.
What is it?
A whole new dry grad.
I don't know what that is.
So when grade 12s, I don't know, maybe you don't have it in the States, but in Canada, like everywhere, they graduate. So my kids, when they graduate, they do their high school, their banquet and everything, but then they do an after party that starts at 11 at night, goes till 6 in the morning, no drinking, of course, because they're 17, but whatever, we were all 17. So dry grad, but they have to do activities. They find activities for them to do all night. And I think that actually doing what you do I feel like there's a whole new market there, because they also tend to bring together multiple schools. So it's not just your one school. It's, could be 300 kids and some of them, but not all of them. So
it would be a good activity.
Yeah, for sure.
Another question from the audience from Liz. What's the biggest lesson you've learned from an event that you did with the kids?
Lessons learned.
Good question.
Look, if you need to learn lessons at every single event, in this space to be able to improve, right? Like, how is the only way to grow as a company, the only way to grow as an event producer is to find things at every single event that we produce that we can improve on. We have a team at our shows that where basically their job is to find things for us to improve on for the next event. right? So it's like we look for the things, and they're different every time. I'm going to try and think of some examples for you, but like one would be our our stage content. We learned early on, like I talked about before, that that kids really aren't interested in a panel discussion, no matter who you have up on stage, right? They are not interested. Parents, yeah, they're into it. Kids, not so much. So we totally revamped what we do on our main stage to make it like highly engaging all the time. We at some points when the pre-sales got to a certain level and we knew we were going to have 2,000 people show up at 9 o'clock in the morning for a 9 a.m. entry, we quickly learned that we need to start actually asking those people to show up at 8 a.m. so we can get them all checked in. So at 9 o'clock, they received the full experience, and the first 20, 30 minutes wasn't queuing and getting checked in. So those are a couple examples that I could share with you, but there are like literally dozens of things that we learn every single event that we improve on. You feel the same way, right, Shelley? I mean,
without a doubt, that hour when you're trying to register that number of kids, do it 3 hours in advance, or try to do it in advance the day before if possible, or anything. You can, in every single event we do, I think, is how do we do that better? Or did that work? And it may not appear to be a negative thing to the audience, but internally, our team might be saying, oh my gosh, don't let that happen again, or let's do it differently. And I also think that sign in, check out process is always a forever, how do you streamline it? How do you make it better? How do you make it seamless, and at the same time personal? So for sure, it's every event you do, you want to do it better and more memorable.
And I'll tell you this, I mean, if there are if there are people in the audience that are watching that they either want to go bigger with their event or they want to start an event for the first time, one of the biggest tips that I would be able to give you is to a lot of focus is usually put on what happens when the event is on, right? Like what's on, and I want to make sure that all my activations are great when the event is on. And what I would urge you all to do is to plan your setup and to plan your strike, okay? Plan your setup and plan your strike, because without a good plan from setup to teardown, your live event when you're actually on is going to suffer. And after everyone leaves and the event is over and you don't have a plan on, all right, now what do I do? How do I get everything down? How do I get everything out of here? And you don't want to be there until the next day packing out. Plan the setup, the stuff that no one sees, that no one talks about, that no one cares about except you and your team. Make sure you have a good plan for that.
As an AV and production guy, amen. Amen.
Yeah, right?
Right on.
It's very true.
Yeah, for us, a lot of times we'll have to move meeting spaces. So ideally, it's great if you have the same meeting space throughout your conference, but sometimes somebody else wants that space or they didn't reserve it, and then we're scrambling to do a reset. So for sure, you're like, oh, wait, you moved meeting spaces. How did you do that in an hour? Well, we threw everything in and ran and reset it up. So for sure, that's a behind the scenes kind of thing that people don't realize. There's a lot of planning.
So now what about the stuff that they do see? Because we've got a great question here from Reed. Thank you, Reed. So the stuff that people do see, and now you want to know what worked and what didn't and what you need to change. So how do you garner feedback on that? Well, two very different kinds of events. So let's start with you.
Yeah, so we have post-show surveys that go out, and we ask for unfiltered feedback. And if we're working like with a sponsor per se, we'll even have specific questions about that sponsor, like if they even noticed that they were there. So it gives us feedback to go back to the sponsor with. But a lot of that post-show, the post-show survey is very important to know what worked and what didn't. We'll even have some of our staff members intentionally go talk with attendees during the show to see how they're doing, and to seeing how we can help them, and to make sure that they know everything that we have that's going on at the event, right? Which is very important, and our staff just does that naturally, and we're all visible. So like at our shows, our staff, we're all wearing the same shirt. It's very clear who's staff, who's not staff. But yeah, I mean, those post-show surveys, I think, is the biggest takeaway there. You're not going to be able to talk to all of your attendees, or at least we're not able to talk to all of our attendees. And the way we can, communicate with most of them most efficiently is a follow-up email that gets feedback. And by the way, who do you think responds the most to those surveys? The people that have things to say about what you can improve on. Because if they're totally happy, and they see me like, I'm fine, right? But no, something happened. Oh, this is their opportunity to let you know. And that's what's going to help you grow and help you get better for the next show. Yeah.
Shelley, how about you?
I would say the same thing. We do a post evaluation for sure. To our, a lot of our clients will do those evaluations. So we'll ask the question, but our clients will do the evaluations. Same kind of thing, that it's absolutely critical that you look at what's working, what's not, how to make it better in the future. So we run into that too.
Yeah, and Chad, you brought up something interesting about getting feedback direct from the attendees. I'm wondering, Shelley, if this is in your world too, are you able to get different feedback? And Reed was kind of alluding to this in his question. Are you able to get feedback from both the participants, the kids themselves, as well as the adults? And is it different? And if so, how?
We definitely do. I mean, our kids sort of speak to it. A lot of our kids are also repeat from year after year. So a lot of them just can't wait, or they're pushing their parents, win the trip so that I can go back to the kids club. So for sure, we ask the kids to participate in it. And we're actually starting a little focus group for our kids. Like we have a KidsAlong Instagram that's just for our kids that kids follow, and they make friends with other friends, with other people in the conference. So it's important, I think, for sure, for parents to give us their feedback. But I think it's equally important to hear that the children are having an enjoyable time that make them feel like they want to return, they can't wait to come back, and they want to tell their friends about it, and again, to create lifetime experiences for them.
So Shelley, we have to start wrapping up here as we wind down, but I want to give you an opportunity to answer a couple of the questions that came in while unfortunately the internet gods were frowning upon you.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, it's no worries. It's no worries at all. But we talked a little bit about staffing.
Yes.
And, how do you find your staff? How do you screen your staff? Is there an appropriate child to staff ratio? I think it would be really great to hear your takes on those questions as well before we have to wrap up.
Thank you. This is the most critical, important part of our business. If without good staff, forget it. I mean, it's all about the staff, in my opinion, to create the experiences. So in our situation, depending on where we are, we'll either partner with an agency that has done background checks, or we have a lot of local staff. We actually use a service called eNanny Source, where we run a full background check of each person for terrible, hopefully they never do terrible things or they wouldn't be working with us, but they really run a solid background about who they are as people. Are they really who they say they are? What is their experience in working with children? But in addition to that, we actually conduct a face-to-face interview, if we're able to, or a video conference interview with multiple layers of people on our team. So it would be an initial recruiting call. It would be another call with one of our program managers, and then it would be a panel of people. So we do multiple levels of it. But most of our staff, many of our staff are repeat staff, which is really wonderful. Or we look to staff or colleges where they are specifically interested in doing working with children, whether it's to be a teacher, a special ed teacher. We want people that want to work with kids. If you don't like kids, you shouldn't be working with us. So really, I think that creates for a really wonderful environment of people that want to be working with children. And that is truly one of the most critical parts of doing our events. Did I answer the question? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it is about that time where we have to start wrapping up. So we're going to close things with the questions that we usually ask, and take it away, Tahira.
Well, so one thing that we do want to ask is, so if you could only pick one thing, what's one tip you would have for other planners out there?
Is this a question for me or for Chad or both of us? I would say if you're really going to consider doing a children's program, or if it's really become an issue where you have 10 or more people trying to sneak their kids into your event, that it's time to really look at whether or not you should offer a kids program. And that I think to really look to your experts, people that really focus on what it takes to put together a kids program. That just because you're a mom or just because you think you know how to do it, I think it's always helpful to align yourself with somebody that is all they do, because we're talking about children, and children are our most important commodity. So that's what I would say, to really pay attention. And it's okay to acknowledge the kids. There are some solutions out there.
Thank you. And Chad?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I think of this like holistically. Like, there has never been a better time on planet Earth to host a live event, and I'm going to tell you why. Because it's easier now than ever before to find your target audience and embed yourself in their community and bring them together and pull them out of their house to an event. So the number one tip I can give you, if you're interested in planning an event, is identify the community, identify where your community is, where are they hanging out online, become part of that community, become a subject matter expert in that community, be known, and then invite people to come hang out with you at the best party you're ever going to throw for their, for that niche.
There you go. Boom. Mic drop moment right there, man. All right. Well, the second question that we always ask people on their way out is, do you have any resources that you want to share with our audience? It could be a blog. It could be a life hack. It doesn't have to be event related, whatever's working for you right now. Chad, let's start with you. What any resources you'd like to share?
Oh, man. Give me a second. Shelley, if you have one queued up, go ahead, and I'll think of something for you.
Well, most people that know me, I'm a podcast crazy girl. And so I listen to my podcast hour in the morning, and I love Tony Robbins. I love Mel Robbins, No Relation. I love Tim Ferriss, Tribe of Mentors. I listen to motivational things and things that help keep me calm in moments when you're not having the internet and you're in the middle of a podcast. Mm-hmm. So, I think that just paying attention, because there's always so much information out there. LinkedIn is a huge resource for me. I look at the news, my news feed on LinkedIn, and what my community is doing and what my meetings community is doing. But really, I love podcasts, and I do love my self-help gurus.
Yeah,
nice.
Don't laugh.
Hey, listen. I'm a huge. I wouldn't be here producing these shows if it wasn't for listening to marketing podcasts. For like 2 hours a day for like a year straight.
Okay, good.
Right. It was like Entrepreneur on Fire, John Lee Dumas, Pat Flynn, like all these guys. And so those are some great resources too. I was going to say, so like internally we use Slack as a resource. Like I know a lot of people watching are probably using that just for internal and external communications with team members. That's been something that's super helpful. I'll give you another tip. If you want to run a ticket giveaway for your event, and oftentimes you'll get a lot of new leads this way because people have to like opt in to be part of your giveaway. We use a tool called UpViral, UpViral. That's going to get you a lot of social proof and a lot of new leads for your event. We use that pretty regularly. If you're advanced, you can integrate that using Zapier to your back-end email system or SMS provider, and then you're off to the races. So there you go, up viral.
There you go. All right. Thanks, Chad. All right.
Yeah.
So, Chad Collins, Open World Incorporated, where can people find out more about you, what you're up to these days? Are you on the Twitters? If so, what's your handle? All that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, at Chad Collins on the Twitters. You could be my 122nd follower on the Twitter.
There you go. There's a prize.
I'm huge there. I'm huge.
Prize for the 123rd, right?
Or check out mindfair.com or brickfestlive.com, and you can see the events that we've got going on. And one of these days, openworldevents.com is going to be up, and then you'll really get the whole view. Once that new logo is finished, Brad, be right there.
Nice.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And Shelley Matheny, right? Matheny?
Yes, you did it right.
Oh, all right. The tough part's over. From KidsAlong Events, where can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
Go to our new website, which we still are adding to, but we're really excited about our new website, KidsAlong Events. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can look up my name. Actually, I have a good following on LinkedIn. And Instagram, we have a KidsAlong Events on Instagram. That, again, and Twitter, well, I have about 10. So you can add to my Twitter. We're working on it. So we're working on increasing our social media platform. But for sure, email, our website. Happy to connect with anybody.
Nice. Well, thank you all for joining us as well. And Tahira, thank you for being the fantastic, wonderful host that you are. Where can folks find out more about you?
Here we're right here, like all the time, like every week. So right here is always good. My new favorite thing, of course, is intentionaleventdesign.ca.
Check it out. And I'm Brant Kruger, Event Technology Consulting. We want to let you know that this is recorded live each Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You can watch behind the scenes on Facebook Live. It's released the following Tuesday on iTunes, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, or whatever your favorite podcast app is. Get those podcasts, right, Shelley? Got to listen to those podcasts. I know I listen to a ton of them every week as well. But event-icons.com is really where we want you to go. You can see the show notes there, the links to the resources that are shared. It's really the best way to join us live because you get to join us right here in Zoom. Join the chat live. Get your questions asked. Fred, Mary, Reed, Roseanne, Stephanie. I know there was a bunch of other folks in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us. We want to know what you think. Use Twitter. Use the hashtag EventIcons or join the EventIcons Facebook group. Let us know what icons you want to have on the show, what kind of topics you want to have, and we'll try and get to them. This show is all about you. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next week on Event Icons.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of #EventIcons. To catch the transcription and all of the resources mentioned, head to www.helloendless.com/blog. This week's episode will be posted and available by next Tuesday. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway and join the social conversation. Sponsored by Little Bird Told Media. Just tag your post with #EventIcons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on #EventIcons.
Nice.